My idea to compare these two seemingly unrelated films came from when I was recently rewatching Sam Raimi's Spider-Man from 2002. It's not really an unpopular or unique opinion to say the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy is great, but I wanted to specifically compare Raimi's first big-budget film to David Cronenberg's comparatively low-budget sci-fi film, eXistenZ, from 1999. So I really love the way both these films use practical effects whenever possible to create convincing worlds and scenarios. These films came out around the same time and had vastly different budgets, but still created convincing effects. Albeit one film sought to inspire with its effects, while the other sought to disgust, confuse, and otherwise horrify. An interesting note, though, is Raimi often used practical effects to blend into visual effects, whereas Cronenberg did not use many visual effects at all. First, let's talk about Cronenberg. The man's name is synonymous with visions of mutation, mutilation, and other grossness. That's because in so many of his films, the effects and horror around them take center stage. eXistenZ has a story with characters who are important to the film, but they sorta seem to exist in service of exploring this warped world adjacent to our own. In another famous Cronenberg film, The Fly from 1986, the viewer gets to watch Jeff Goldblum become a grotesque insectoid monster, while the story is also happening. It's clear to me, at least, that Cronenberg likes to evoke emotions of shock and revulsion in order to better transport and immerse his audience into the realms he constructs on the silver screen, and eXistenZ is a perfect example of this. The game systems themselves are bubbling and oozing pockets of flesh that use an umbilical cord to jack into the game. The weapons are grisly abominations made of skin and bone that shoot teeth. All of these elements put the viewer into the shoes of the characters. Once the characters start to question their reality, the viewer's mind has already been working overtime to decipher if any of this was ever real. The tangibility of Cronenberg's world is what makes the audience accept the absurd game system and fantastical weapons. The limited budget of the film, which was slightly under 25 million USD, about 31 million in Canadian dollars, is what made it so believable. If these elements had been done in post with visual effects, the charm and realism would be almost entirely removed. Raimi used visual effects quite a bit in Spider-Man. However, contrary to what I've been saying, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. With its massive budget of $139 million USD, Raimi could have gone full MCU CGI for almost every web-slinging action scene, but he didn't. The film blends practical effects with visual effects to transport the viewer into a world where men climbing up walls could really exist. The film constantly snaps between an animated shot, then, before the audience can start spotting the holes in the facade, bam, we're right back with flesh and blood. The blending of these elements is what grounds the film. A second ago I just said that Raimi could have gone full MCU CGI, but that's not exactly true. It should be fairly easy to see how this movie's blending of the effects were instrumental to its success. Now that I've given a bit of background on both of these films, how does this all fit together? Both films use their practical effects well to communicate emotion and to immerse the viewer. Upon the first sighting of the gross slime console in eXistenZ, the audience instantly understands the tone of the film and can tell something is wrong. When Peter shoots his first web, the audience can feel it and can imagine what it must be like to touch it, and even shoot or swing on it. In other films, the visual effect of a computer-generated man flying through the air may take you out of the experience. Meanwhile, because of the practical effects used in the film, the CG only feels whimsical and exaggerated, not jarring or out of place. Both films focus on real and tangible props, or sets, to create a false reality, something that I'm a bit disappointed hasn't stuck around much in modern-day films. I found a great article by the Huffington Post that discusses how Toy Story from 1995 pioneered the excessive use of CGI that we have today. It was the first full-length CGI film, and in the years that followed, we would see more and more artists turn to CGI in order to transport audiences to new realities. CGI is a great tool for artists, but I feel like each time movies are shot entirely on green screens, we lose an important human element and move ever so slightly away from whimsicality and enter an entirely synthetic creation. The article cited The Jungle Book for its egregious use of CGI. In this film, the environments and animals never existed even on a set. No props, nothing. It was all just fabricated on a computer in the months following filming.